Hello, my Biblio darlings, and welcome. In case we haven't met before, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Mally, and the story that I'm going to be reading to you today is called Mr. Greedy. But before I read Mr. Greedy to you, let's remind our body that we are safe right here and right now. And how we're going to do this is by two exercises. One is 4-4-8 deep breathing exercise, where we're going to inhale for 4 counts, hold the breath for 4 counts, and exhale for 8 counts. And then I'm going to share with you 3 knock-knock jokes. And the whole reason for this is when we laugh, our body relaxes naturally. So with that, let's do the deep breathing exercise. So when you're ready, pretend you have a pretend balloon inside your tummy and make it bigger. So inhale deeply for 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold the breath for And now exhale out for 8. Oh, what a beautiful reminder to get breath in our body. And now let's remind the body to laugh and get more relaxed. So I will share with you 3 knock-knock jokes. And sometimes I get them and sometimes I don't understand them at all. But bear with me. So, ready for the first one? Okay. Knock knock. Who's there? Nut. Nut who? Not so fast there. Where do you think you're going? Oh, get it? Not so fast? Okay, here's the second one. Knock, knock. Who's there? Huff. Huff who? Have you heard the news? I'm running for president. Oh, have you heard the news? That's cute. Knock, knock. Who's there? Norway. Norway who? Norway will we win without your help. Oh, that's kind of cute too. Alrighty. Well, with that, let's read Mr. Greedy. And here's what I notice about the cover. Mr. Greedy is red, and looks like he has a big tummy, and it looks like he has his fingers from one hand over his tummy, and he's smiling. Mr. Greedy. Mr. Greedy liked to eat. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat, and the more he ate, the fatter he became. And the trouble was, the fatter he became, the more hungry he became. And the more hungry he became, the more he ate. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. And so it went on. And it looks like Mr. Greedy has almost a whole cake in his hand. There's a little piece on the plate that's on the table. But it looks like Mr. Greedy has the whole cake minus one piece in his hand. And he's licking his lips like, that looks delicious. So I'm thinking, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think Mr. Greedy's going to eat that whole cake minus the one piece. Mr. Greedy lived in a house that looked rather like himself. It was a roly-poly sort of house. One morning, Mr. Greedy awoke earlier than usual. He'd been dreaming about food, as usual, and that had made him wake up feeling hungry as usual. Excuse me for burping. So Mr. Greedy got up, went downstairs, and ate the most enormous breakfast. I wonder what Mr. Greedy ate. Oh, they're giving me an answer, which is great. This is what Mr. Greedy had for his breakfast. Toast, 2 slices. Well, that sounds okay. Cornflakes, 1 box. 1 whole box? Wow. Milk, 1 bottle. Wow. Sugar, 1 bowlful. Ooh. Toast. He's having more toast. 3 slices. Eggs, 3 boiled. Toast, 4 slices. Butter, 1 dish. Marmalade, which is like a jam, 1 pot or 1 jar. So let's count them up. He had, for toast, he had 2 plus 3 is 5 plus 4 is 9. He had 9 pieces of toast. Whoa, that's a lot of food. When he had finished his enormous breakfast, Mr. Greedy sat back in his chair, smiled a very satisfied smile, and thought, "That was a delicious breakfast," he thought to himself. "Now I wonder what would be nice to have for lunch." He decided in order to work up an appetite for lunch, he would go for a long walk. Well, that kind of makes sense. That morning, Mr. Greedy walked and walked and walked. Then he discovered a cave. Oh, that's funny, he thought. I don't remember seeing that there before. And there's Mr. Greedy walking. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to explore. He entered the dark cave. Inside, he discovered some giant steps leading upwards. Whoa, the giant step looks as tall as Mr. Greedy is. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to climb them, the stairs. They were very steep and very difficult to climb. But with much huffing and puffing, Mr. Greedy climbed up and up. At the top of the steps, Mr. Greedy came to a door. It was, without a doubt, the biggest door that Mr. Greedy had ever seen, and it wasn't quite shut. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of a fellow, decided to see what was on the other side of that door. So Mr. Greedy squeezed himself through the crack in the door, and there before him was an amazing sight. The biggest room in the world. Wow, I'm just looking at Mr. Greedy standing by the door. Mr. Greedy looks so little and the door looks so big. The floor was as big as a field. The table in the middle of the room was as big as a house. And the chairs around it were as high as trees. Mr. Greedy felt very small. Then he sniffed. Coming from somewhere up on top of the gigantic table was the most delicious, foody smell that Mr. Greedy had ever smelled. I wonder what's on the table. Mr. Greedy sniffed again, and then decided that he must get up onto that table. So he began to climb up the leg of the enormous chair, and that chair was so tall. It was very difficult, and it took him a long time, but eventually Mr. Greedy stood on the table. Everything was larger than life. The salt and pepper shakers were both bigger than Mr. Greedy. Look at them. They're white and blue, and they've got horizontal stripes, and they're taller than Mr. Greedy. Wow. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, and Mr. Greedy tried to lift one of the oranges. Oh, there's Mr. Greedy, and he's lifting an orange, but it's bigger than him. And Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, took a bite out of one of the apples too. Then he looked around. Look at that big plate of food. It looks like there is potatoes, big potatoes and peas, and maybe some sausages. Let's read. Over on the other side of the table stood the source of that delicious smell. A huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. And on the plate, huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal sausages the size of pillows. And huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal potatoes the size of beach balls. And huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal peas the size of cabbages. Mr. Greedy hurried across the table towards the plate, and being Mr. Greedy, began to eat. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the plate, and Mr. Greedy found himself being picked up by a giant hand and looking into the eyes of a real, live giant. I mean, look at the hand that's grabbing Mr. Greedy. Those are big fingers. And who, thundered the giant, are you? Mr. Greedy was so frightened that he could only just manage to squeak his name. Mr. Greedy, he squeaked as he was being squeezed. The giant laughed a laugh as loud as thunder. Greedy by name and greedy by nature, he bellowed. Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson. Wonder what the giant has in mind. And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy eat up everything on that huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. When he had finished, Mr. Greedy felt very ill indeed, as if he would burst at any minute. I'm not surprised. That was a lot of food. Now, said the giant in a much quieter voice, do you promise never to be greedy again? Oh, yes, moaned Mr. Greedy. I promise. Very well, said the giant. Then I'll let you go. Mr. Greedy climbed down from the table and went out through the door feeling very fat and extremely miserable. I'm not surprised. And do you know, from that day to this, Mr. Greedy has kept his promise. And do you know something else as well? Mr. Greedy doesn't look like he used to look anymore. He now looks like this, which I think suits him a lot better, don't you? Now let's look at Mr. Greedy. He has lost a lot of weight. He no longer has a big tummy. So if you know anybody who's as greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants. That is quite the story. So what did you think of Mr. Greedy? That was quite the story, but can you imagine eating food that's huge? Could you imagine eating a pea that's the size of a cabbage? Oh, that would be so yummy. Anyway, I love food. So with that, oh, pardon me. Let's remind, I burped again. Let's remind our body, after that wonderful story, that we are still safe in this moment and that everything is good and calm for right now. So when you're ready, let us do that same deep breathing exercise. Ready? So inhale deeply for 1, 2, 3, 4. And now let's hold the breath for Now let's exhale out the breath for 8. What a good reminder that we are safe and everything is good and that deep breath is filling our lungs. So with that, let me help you to relax your body some more and read to you some more jokes. Knock, knock. Who's there? Muffin. Muffin who? Muffin the matter with me. How about you? Like nothing's the matter with me but muffin? And let's read this joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? Elise. Elise who? Elise, I didn't break my other arm too. Knock, knock. Who's there? Elise. Elise who? Elise, I didn't break my other arm too. Oh, at least I didn't break my other arm too. You know, sometimes I find the jokes funny and sometimes they're okay. Anyway, I'm hoping that the jokes made you laugh. And thank you so much for joining in the stories and the deep breathing and the jokes for today. It's been wonderful spending time with you. And if you've enjoyed what you've watched, please click on the subscribe button. Click on the bell notification to be notified of when there's a new story being read. Well, as always, it's been wonderful spending time with you. And until next time, bye!